You may notice that Chase Harrington is not on with us. We gave him the day off to get some much needed R&R. So Virginia and I are going to be taking the reins today and talking through the year. I know we've had similar webinars over the past little while, once a month, and we did them once every other week in the early year. But we wanted to just kind of give a snapshot of how the year just rounded out and how the trends were looking overall. And so this is our opportunity to do that, and we have a few takeaways to talk about as well. Just a matter of housekeeping items. We will have this recorded. It will be on the COVID-19 landing page on entrada.com later this afternoon. We will have the slides available as well. And if anyone is interested, we're talking mostly data from 2020 and comparing it to previous years, but we will have our trends white papers available by the end of the week for Rent Week in February. So be on the lookout for those as they're coming up as well. So with that quick disclaimer, we'll get started.
You've got a quick announcement before you're.
Oh, that's right. I do have a quick
announcement.
Yes, let's make sure. Oh yeah.
Yep.
If we haven't already, if anyone on this call hasn't already, be sure to register for Basecamp Live. We are obviously pretty bummed that we're not going to be able to meet everyone in person this year. I think our Basecamp last year was really what kicked off the pandemic. So we're around that time again. I can't believe it's been a year, but Basecamp Live, we've been working really hard to make this a really fun, engaging event. If you came to Entrada Connect, you'll know that we're trying to make the most out of our online events and really make them worth your while. The trainers have been preparing very hard. We've got tons of great learning sessions, and this is the last week for the early bird and group discounts. So be sure to register your team today. Quick note, most of this data is throughout the end of the year, information through January 8th. It is aggregated to normalize. Same disclaimer that we've had through this whole time. With that said,
math, it's hard.
Math is hard.
Yeah,
it's not our strong point.
Not our strong point. Not mine and yours at least. So, but no, good.
That's why we went into marketing, Virginia.
That's exactly why we went into marketing. Yeah, Greg Loznak, who used to work for us, to say that somebody else needed to hold the leash. You know, you're the one that's going to run off the porch. You're the Rottweiler. Somebody else has to hold the leash. That's for marketing to do.
That's
We're
right.
going to go crazy. So yeah, and I think this is great. Thank you, Kobe, for joining me, because I certainly do miss Chase being here, but it's a lot of shoes to fill, some big shoes to fill, but he got pulled away, and we're glad that he's able to take a little bit of a break from all these webinars and Zoom calls that he's been on. So we're going to start off the slides, just have we done, like Kobe said, just like we've done, and we're going to go through things like occupancy and rents and renewals month to month. We're going to talk about leads. We're going to talk about things that we're seeing as trends. We're going to talk about tour types, all kind of stuff. So we're going to try to keep this 30, 45 minutes at all possible. But what we do think is really interesting about everything that we're going to share today is that you're going to be able to see like where the gaps were forming in the beginning of COVID, like those April, May months. And then when things started to get closer and tighter, you're going to see where the stimulus came into play, and where now that we're kind of figuring out where the stimulus is going to be, where it's getting a little bit, gaps are getting a little bit bigger. We encourage you to go back and look at this information against your own company data. And we really sincerely cannot wait to the end of this year. Not that we want to rush through 2021, but that's when the new pattern is really going to show. We think that, and we had I spoke at a call with NMHC yesterday, that this new pattern that we're seeing is just sort of a completely different change of direction for the industry, something we've not seen. So this hiccup of 2020 is going to be around for a little while, right? So keep all that in mind. It's a lot to digest. So let's do it, Kobe. Let's
dive in.
Are you all in with occupancy? So
That's
as a reminder, as we start off with occupancy, when we're looking at the numbers, at the next slide, with the student properties are always the ones that are in red, and then the conventional are going to be in like this teal kind of bluish green color. So looking at occupancy, no doubt that it's a record year for student housing. I'm going to tell y'all, these are the quickest people. I've never seen people pivot so much, so quickly. And it's because their demographic demands it, right? It's a much younger demand. They're real quick to finding a solution. They've done things like move from having what they call turn, when everybody moves into the property at the beginning of the semester, where they needed all kind of feet on the street to do it, to doing it all virtually. They will not go back ever doing it that way again. But you can see here what the biggest problem that they had with occupancy right about the time that school was supposed to start, when you look at 2019 to 2020, is they didn't really have any control of what these schools were doing, right? I mean, we all talked about it for months. That when are they going to start? Are they going to start early? Are they going to start late? Are they going to let them come in and have double occupancy in dorms? If they don't let them, then they're going to need a student apartment on campus. Are the parents going to still let them go to school even though they're not going to school in person? All of these things came into effect and had that little bit of a drop. I mean, under 3% is a great story. And as the vaccines are rolled out and the schools are getting back into play, we think that this is going to improve vastly for 2021. So we think that by the fall, they'll probably be back, back in line.
Yeah, to me, you can tell that the trend lines are almost identical. It just looks like a percentage of the schools were closed. And then now we're starting to close the gap at the end of the year when some of those schools are starting to reopen.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And what I think is so interesting with student, when you look at all of their delays happened before conventional for the year, right? Because they were like, okay, what are we going to do? We're going to do this. That doesn't work. We'll do this. I mean, they were doing things quicker and quicker. So that means, in my mind, and I think what you just said, is that gap's going to close even faster when things kind of get back to what they're used to doing. So I think a 2.64% drop year over year is in the middle of a pandemic, when one of the lead stories every morning on the news was what colleges were doing, and families want money back because they're not getting the same experience, and all these different stories. I think it's super duper impressive. I mean, all of our clients impressed me. Our student clients really impressed me throughout this. So yeah, good point. So then we look at conventional. Here we go. Again, look at us. We ended up just 0.21% down year over year in occupancy percentages. I'm going to tell you, this is an impressive number. I mean, impressive any year, but in the year of a pandemic, it just shows how resourceful our clients are, how they stayed in front of things to be competitive in 2020. I mean, really, I think without COVID, we were looking at a record-setting year for housing. The fact that we ended up about flat where we were in 2019 is just literally amazing to me. So I think that is a huge win. And we're going to look at some of the things with renewals and month to months. And we're going to see a lot of the times, like Dennis Smiley is telling us right now, in a face of lower renewals and higher month to month, we're going to see that just next, because we don't have a lot of control over where people are moving. There was if you want to move to the next slide, Kobe, when we talk about renewals, yesterday on the Today Show, they announced that there was 15.9 million change of address cards filled out in 2020. Now that goes across all housing types. Those are not just apartment people. Those are not just people living in professionally managed apartments, all housing types, not just renters, everybody. But still, say that slice was a 1/10 of our industry or 20% of our industry. That is a massive number. What we know is that when things are going well, people move, they move toward the coast, they move into a city. When things aren't going well, they kind of move out where it's less expensive. But COVID threw all that for a loop. People could afford to be downtown, but they didn't want to be downtown because they wanted more space. They wanted to be able to breathe. They wanted a place to walk their dog and not have to get on an elevator. So we're kind of throwing all these things that we've known all these years out the window when we're starting fresh. So flip to that first slide where we take a look at conventional. We only look at conventional renewals and month-to-month practices, of course. With the renewals, I mean, this is a combination, 12% down year over year. This is a combination of, people are combining households, they're relocating, they're purchasing homes. When you can work from anywhere, why would you want to work in somewhere super duper expensive like San Francisco or New York City, Seattle? We're still seeing a lot of that. Who was it yesterday? Salesforce announced that they're going to let their people work from anywhere they want to. That's a huge game changer in commercial real estate. So a lot of this is just that uncertainty too, this gap here toward December of what's going to happen with the stimulus. Like, I'd like to stay, but I need some help, right? I need to find out what kind of money am I going to get back to $600 a week or whatever. So they're all kind of it's in a wait and see mode. Yeah, go ahead.
I also think the eviction moratorium played a big part in this as well, because people aren't signing renewals because they know that they are not going to be evicted anytime soon.
Yep.
So that renewal cycle is going to be pushed down the road a little ways.
Yeah, I agree. And yesterday on the NMHC call, we talked just about that. We've been talking all this year with clients about how a vacant is a victory, that, you want to get your keys back if someone does not have any intention to pay. And we're going to talk in a little bit about like sort of that sort of long-term bad debt, what that past due rent is looking like. But you're 100% correct. I mean, there's a fair amount of folks that are still sort of in that wait and see pattern. They're not worried about getting evicted, but as things start to change there, hopefully, clients are managing that process. We know how many they are, along with knowing, good segue, Kobe, on your part, with the month to month. Those renewals and the month to month go hand in hand. And if you go to the next slide, this is something that we've been focused on throughout the year and that we started seeing early on, that month to months were growing. Now, I will say this, the graph does not show the extent that we thought this was going to be such a big focus. But what we heard was, when you're talking about a 400 unit property and you have 2 month to months, and the next month you have two more, and the next month you have two more, and the next month you have two more, next thing you have 8 people that are able to leave with 30 days notice, that you're probably waiving month to month fees. Month to months are great to have when you're getting the fees for it, right? Because you're getting market rent plus 10%. So, but if you're waiving the fees, they're not great to have because it's just increasing your exposure. So we did increase higher than typically 1.4% higher year over year than we did in 2019. But this is still something we're going to follow because we still hear, to your point, with the evictions, a lot of these aren't renewing. And if they're not renewing, they're on a month to month lease, right? But some operators are taking them, saying, okay, we'll do a 2 month lease, a 3 month lease. So they're starting to put those month to months on a shorter term lease. But we do think that this is going to be something to continue to watch.
Yep.
Month to month. So let's get down to the nit and the gritty of rental payments, everybody's favorite thing. So I think Kobe mentioned at the beginning of this is that how we have to sort of look at the data across the year to be able to report it. We don't want to take an aggregated number and make it another aggregated number. So what we have today to share with you is sort of like what we're seeing from 2020. And then we are going to be able to, keep in mind that a lot of this information is on graphics that are only like a 3 or 4% change, but it looks a lot more dramatic than it is. But we think it tells such a good story to see how it started and sort of how it ended. So let's take a look at that first. This is just sort of like the overall snapshot, right, Kobe?
Yeah, this is the snapshot of January. So this is just a moment in time compared to the year over year.
Right. So this is the percentage of units who paid on time in January of 2001 compared to 2020 for student and conventional, and then the percentage collected. So 86% for student for 2021, same for January of last year, and they've uncollected a little bit higher this year than it was last year. And for conventional, just a touch, just 1 point lower from conventional properties for collections from 2020. And then our uncollected for conventional is a little bit higher. So, but when you look at it on these graphs, that we would be remiss not to thank our marketing and our design teams at Entrata and everybody that is pulling this data for us. This is not an easy thing. And we are 5 minutes before going live and we're still putting together slides as hard as we try not to, but we just want the most current information. But if you jump next, Kobe, to those slides that we added, and we're able to take a look at student, the percentage of rent paid from March when the pandemic started, because this is when we sort of, normalized the data that we could share with you, through January of 2021, you can see, I mean, this is a scale that's going from 90.1% to 95.5%. So a 5% occupancy scale here. But you can see where we're clipping right along. Then as the pandemic hit, it started to drop. With student, this tells a story that we keep on saying. When they pushed out when school was going to start, when the kids didn't know what to do, when the parents didn't know what they were going to do, everything got kind of lower. So less occupancy, less rent, right? That's easy. That's easy math. But then they started getting the school started saying they're going to start 30 days later, 45 days later, and everything is clipping right along. But that January 2021 number only goes through when, Kobe?
That's the end of the month.
End of the month. Perfect. Thank you. That was not a quiz. That was actually a question I could not remember. And I know you told me before we started. So that goes to the end of the month. So, you know, people have been pushing late fees out further and further. So right now where they're falling, it's not terrible bad, right? I mean, it looks really, really good. They've collected, you know, 86% of the rent by the, you know, by the end of the month. So no, 92% of the rent by the end of the month. So
Yeah.
let's take a look at the next one. The percentage of uncollected rent from March 2020 to January 2021 per student, again, uncollected rent. What's interesting here is you sort of see that same situation where everything was a little bit delayed, where they had their move-ins is around that, you know, July, August timeframe, and then things kind of took a little bit of a dip in October. Now we're back up and they're back at collecting at a nice pace.
Yeah, and
That's
this
a
is
good
one of
story.
those. This is one of those data points that you might not have seen yet, Virginia, since we just put it in the deck
Yep.
5 minutes before we started. So
Oh, I probably didn't then.
this is the first time we're taking a look at this well. You can see the huge spike in December of uncollected rent. I don't know if that was just students saying, you know, this isn't for me, I'm moving home and just not paying, or what, but that's kind of an anomaly for December.
Yeah, it is. And again, some of the students, maybe they said, let's go give it a shot. Let's do one semester, you know, through the pandemic. And if everything's not back to normal by January, you're going to move home. I don't know. You know, we just don't know yet. So we'll be able to see that as we go further. Now, conventional, this is the graph that we were like, looked at and we're like, ick, you know, this is not what you want to see. But again, keep in mind, we're looking at 92.75% to 95.5%. So it's about a 3.25% graph, a percentage on the graph. But what it does show is, I think anybody can say, you know, at the beginning of all this, we thought nobody was going to pay rent. I mean, and while it hasn't been a great time for everything, I will say, I think a lot of us are very surprised in how rents have come. Affordable's done well, conventional's done well, students done well. Those C-class properties, workforce housing, that still has a little bit of a struggle, but people figured it out. And a lot of the reason why they figured it out is because clients got super smart, and things that we're going to talk about in a second, like payment plans and using credit cards, communicating, all of these things let them get to 94.25% of the rent in July. I mean, that was like the heat of it, right? And even had a bump in August. And then, like we talked about before, that leasing, sort of like the summer leasing season, kind of got pushed a little bit. So a lot of what we're seeing with this little bit of drop in paid rent is not so much, you know, it's not so much like a red flag of what's going to happen. Are they all moving out? This is a lot of this is just how it's always worked. So we don't want to get too freaked out about it, even though we know the graph, it looks a little strong, does it not?
Looks a little scary.
Looks a little scary, right? And then the percentage of uncollected rent. So the uncollected rent, of course, going up, just like the collected rent's going down. That's just how life happens, right? But we think that right now at 8% for the end of January is pretty solid for where we are. What's interesting to me when I look at this is that we had a spike in November, and we were trying to come back up and collect more in December, kind of like the opposite of what was happening. And now here we back are at 8%. What will be interesting, again, I keep saying this, folks are still doing things like waiving their late fees. They're still extending their late fees. Their late dates. They're not saying late on the 5th, late on the 6th. They're saying things like, okay, it's late on the 15th. They're still doing a lot of these things that they put in place. So it's hard to compare apples to apples when it comes to things, because all the clients kind of were doing something that they thought was going to work for them. And we applaud that. We certainly applaud that.
And just to know, this is something that we've never actually shown in these trends before. Yeah. Typically with rents, we're just showing a snapshot of the rent week or the month before. This is the first time we've actually shown the trend for the entire pandemic.
Yeah, for the year. And Dennis Smiley just made a point that's good, that the numbers that you see in the press are the spread on a graphic over millions of units. You know, that when you look at a lot of those graphics, it looks really dramatic, and it is dramatic. We get it. This is very important, but we're talking millions of units here. You know, we're talking about very small numbers of collected percentage. So don't get freaked out by the way the graphic looks, Virginia. I'm telling myself that. So this is something that I think is super duper important that we talk about just real quickly. Yesterday on the NMHC call, we talked a lot about when was back rent going to be due. And this has a lot to do with the stimulus package that we're all sort of sitting around and waiting for. And, I think the thing there to think about is like there's all kind of reports. It was going to be one $25 billion stimulus package, and there's going to be a second $25 billion stimulus package. I think what we can all understand is that the rent range for back rent due is anywhere from $27 billion to $57 billion. I mean, a $30 billion gap is a lot of a gap. And we know that the roughly $19 million that they have put toward renters assistance as part of the last relief bill is just not going to be enough. I mean, there's just really no way that it's going to be enough. So the one thing that we want to make sure that that we're looking at when we're thinking about back rent due is how are we communicating to our clients and giving you the information that so you can share it with your resident base. When there are solutions, NMHC, NAA, we're all tracking this very closely. We will be sharing this on the COVID page when those solutions of how to for your residents, how to get some of their funds for their back rent. There's also going to be processes that allow operators to get funds for their back rent that's due too, that you can, there's going to be a process that said so in the release that you're going to be able to go and say, hey, this is how much I'm delinquent and where's my share. One thing that I think is important to think about, and we said this at the early part of COVID, is that to create a GL account so you can track expenses that you were doing to COVID, just like you would do a hurricane or a fire or anything else. One thing that Dennis Smiley and I talk a lot, we were talking about the other day about it might be a good idea to think about if you're going to get some of those funds, start thinking about, okay, if we apply for them and then if we get them, a lot of ifs there, how are we going to track those funds paying for rent as opposed to, residents paying their rent? So there's a lot of questions to be answered there. My advice about the back rent paid is just wait and see. Well, what's been cool is to see how many people have chosen rent over other expenses like vacations, new cars, new clothes, things like that. I mean, I think we've all been very surprised. But when you think about that number being anywhere from 27 billion to 57 billion, that's a lot. That's a lot. So we'll be for bringing more information forward as it comes, and we'll be willing to help you any way that you need to. We're looking at ways that you'll be able to share it on your portal with your residents, however you choose to get the word out once those solutions are made possible. So thanks for stopping there for me, Cobes. So when we look at payment types, and let's look at student first, of course. So we're looking at payment types. When you're looking at, say, the credit card, and this is true whether it is student or conventional. Credit card, debt payment, 5% up for student, scan check, 7% down. Love that. Nobody wants to touch a paper check, right? Let's get rid of it. We love the fact that this number is getting tighter and tighter every month. Scanning a check takes manpower. Somebody has to stand there and do it. Pay it online with a credit card, pay it online with your e-check, setting up your e-check. That is no manpower. So let's continue that trend. We love that trend. But what we don't know about this trend, whether it's student or conventional, is how many of these people that are paying with credit cards have to pay with a credit card because they have no money and they're trying to stay afloat and they're going to use their line of credit to help them do that, or how many of them are doing what I would call chasing miles, because they want to get their miles because they're not doing their travel like we're all used to. So either way, it's here to stay. And a lot of the clients have waived the credit card fees. I would say the majority of them waived them. That was a good practice, right? I mean, if it's 2.5%, say for Visa or MasterCard, whatever the number is, on $1,000 rent, that's $25. Folks are just factoring that into the renewal for everyone on the property. They're like, okay, let's keep this. Let's keep this offer it. Let's just go ahead, put it into the factor it as part of the renewal and keep that as a service. Because what's going to really stink, and I could, this kind of gives me, makes my heart hurt, is when you offer all these things and then you go back and you go, oh, now that it's over, now you have to pay the fee. Yeah, we're not, it's really hard, right, Kobe? I mean, it's difficult. So it might be better just to think about a plan. How can you keep that as a service? Because they're paying with it, they like it, and your competition's doing it.
Yeah.
Then if you look at the next one, the conventional, sort of the same story here for conventional, even higher credit card. And let's just continue to, like I said, drop that scan check percentage that gives back the time to everybody on your team. Get that increase in that e-check. Get them on paperless payments. Get that scanner out of your leasing office. That's the name of the game there. That, for me, this is a huge win for us as not only as an industry, but try to, as a company, we hear over and over how many times people love to not have to touch payments.
Yeah, you can see the gap starting to close at the end of
Yep.
2019, which was great. And you see right when that pandemic hit, that was
not touching anything. Exactly.
It started to squish.
Exactly. It did start to squish. That means getting rid of your rent drop boxes. I mean, all kind of cool stuff happens when you get rid of payments. So cool. Payment types. So now let's talk about these fees and these repayment agreements that we did. So, one of the things that I think is really interesting about when we talk about late fees and repayment agreements is, let's go back to the beginning of COVID and think about everything that we did, everybody said, okay, how are we going to stay and capture as much rent as we can? These were two of the options that that folks had with repayment agreements. We did a whole webinar on it about how to set things up, how to set up and delay late fees. We can still do that. And again, you might want to take a look and see what your practice is. You might want to make some edits, or as what we were seeing yesterday with the webinar with NMHC, some of the repayment agreement things are starting to come back up. So we'll talk about that here in a second after we talk about late fees. So late fees, again, in the red is student. Year over year, it's about 16.79% down year over year, and the late fees waived are up. Now, again, remember that this pushed when rent was late. They pushed out when rent was late a lot of times. They said it's not late on the 5th. It's going to be late on the 15th, or maybe, on the 25th even. And a lot of times they waived the late fees to keep that occupancy percentage up. This is not a terrible number. This is 100%. And you can see where the gaps are is when it started in March, April, May, when we were in the heat of it. And specifically to student, back to me saying over and over again, their whole season got pushed out. They got pushed out like 2 months, some of them a little bit even later, because they didn't know what was going to happen with people living on campus. So not a bad number. This is one of those things that's going to look completely different next year for them. But when you look at the conventional, year over year, 12.9% down for late fees posted, late fees waived, 92%. Same sort of conversation. It's interesting that with both of these, student and conventional, they both were able to close that gap, to make sure that they are able to perform in 2020. And that's what they did. They're like, you know what? We're going to waive the late fees. We're going to push them out. We're going to, we'll waive your late fee if you can get on a renewal. We'll, all these different creative things that they did. But that gap shows that during the months that they needed it, that they needed to have those cards to play to stay competitive in business and help their residents out. They did it. Now it's closing back up. So good news. That's good news. But the repayment agreement, I mentioned this yesterday on the NMHC call. They mentioned that for both, for both the owner manager, the operator, and for the client, some things have gotten a little bit sticky with communication for some product types and for some markets. So I'm going to mention that when we go over the repayments for conventional. So looking at student repayment first, it was up. That's that next slide. That was up 400.5%. This is the highest percentage we've seen. But they went from never offering one, right? I mean, so of course it went up. And what's really funny about the repayment, it was something that we all talked about doing. Everybody was going to offer. And then they had it in their arsenal, and a lot of people didn't take them up on it. And then they started, conventional had a little bit better adoption to it. But student, it was sort of like, okay, yes, if they'll let us postpone payment, they'll let us do a repayment, do it. And then the parents or whatever loan the student was going to get for housing came through. So they got right back on track. So year over year, it's really high because it's really nothing they've ever seen before. When you look at conventional, same thing, bigger percentage. That was the highest for student, 887% year over year of new repayment plans created for each month. But take a look where we are. In 2019, in December, we had about 63 repayment agreements. Now we're at 622. So there's still agreements out there, right? And that's very specific to what's going on, or to the, these are by repayment plans created each month. This is by 1,000. But this is very specific to what's happening in individual markets, that people that need the help. And what we talked about at NMHC yesterday was that those lines of communication when you're dealing with payments, and if you start and sort of thinking everything is going to be fine with someone, and you stop these communications, you stop this having this conversation with your residents, then they're going to probably go silent, right? And that's what we heard yesterday from folks, that they're having an increasing amount of non-communication, residents that will not communicate with them about rent payments. So some of these operators have stopped, gone back, opened up the line of communication again, made it super clear that the goal is to keep that line of communication open, come up with a solution that works not only for the resident, but for the owner manager. And this is starting to creep up a little bit. It's creeping up because no one knows what's going to happen with the stimulus, right? I mean, that's like the deciding factor there. Would you agree?
Yep, 100%.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you for that 100%. So leasing, top end of the funnel, my favorite thing to talk about is leads. So let's look at new leads for student. Now, remember, leasing stalled for student pretty strongly. When you look at April, and the red is in April for 2020, and the gray is 2019, and then they picked back up. But this is a perfect graph for student of what's happened. It just shows that stair step that we talked about before. You know, it looks really, really good with new leads. And then if you look at conventional, total opposite graph. When you look at conventional, you can see where conventional is like, put the brakes on in March and April, a little bit in May, and then we got better, and we're like, okay, things are getting there, the leads are getting there, that's good. And now, you know, leads are up 83%. Now, I will say this, that this is a whole new marketing pattern. I've been doing this for 28 years. I have never seen anything that looks like this, and I've not seen this many leads at the top end of the funnel in a long time. And all the ILSs, I was on one of the ILSs was having a virtual review before this that I got on, and I've not seen this many leads been reported from all the ILSs in forever that I can think of, and they're all reporting record-breaking lead volume. So the top of that funnel is still very high, you know. And when will it get kind of back to normal, where we don't have, you know, all these extra leads that aren't converting, that we're trying to manage, that aren't responding, or are still looking at 12 different assets, or don't know if they're going to live in Atlanta or if they're moving to Dallas. I mean, there's a lot of unknown with some of these leads. We don't know. It's going to probably be for a while, but you know, just stay on those leads, working those leads. We're going to talk about taking them through the funnel here in a second. But and work with your ILS. I know a lot of them are willing to do some stuff like do some lease matches for you to go in and take a look and see if you're getting the right attribution, work with your Entrata team members, whatever we can do. Look at your cost per lead, your cost per tour, your cost per lease. Look at all of that information, make good business decisions when it comes to your marketing dollars.
Yep.
But one of my favorite things that we have done through the pandemic was how we added to tour types. So if you look on the next slide, we added in, it was July the 15th of this past year of 2020, that we added tour types to the website. So we added that you can have agent accompanied, self-guided, or a virtual tour type. You can use 1, 3, 2, and any mix that you would like. We've added it where you can put it on your website, that you can put on your advertise it in your ILSs, so your prospects know that you have these tour types. Put it on signage, put it on your contact points, put it in your resident referral, everywhere you have it. And this has been something that has been so big, not just for Entrata, but as the industry. And what is so great about it is that the way that it was built out in Entrata is for any level that you want to do it. If you want to do it with Smart Home, you can do it with Smart Home. If you want to do it more holistically or organically, you can do it that way. So we have a solution built in for there. If you've not been convinced to give it a shot yet, this is what's going to convince you. This is frightening to me in a good way. I'm like, could this possibly be real? We went back and we looked at the numbers a couple of times. So we're looking at the 3 tour types: guided tours, self-guided tours, virtual tours. And we're looking at 4 numbers. There's 2 slides. Kobe's going to move the slide here in a second. The first number is the number of properties that are offering it. That's the top number. The number of recorded events by tour type. Then we'll look at the number of tour to application rate and the tour to lease rate. So we're starting with self-guided tours, guided tours, self-guided tours, virtual tours. And look at this number, that the tour to lease conversion rate for guided tours is 19.8%, self-guided tours right at 12.7%, virtual tours 18.47%. But Kobe, do me a favor and blop up to the previous slide. Back up 1 slide and look at the volume. And Dennis is saying this is the new normal. Exactly. This is the slide right here. This is the new normal. People say, you know, we heard a lot, and I spent most of my time at the beginning of COVID with clients saying, well, we don't really want to do virtual tours. We don't want to do self-guided tours. We're going to just wait till things get back to normal. Here we are. a month away from when it started. So I'm telling you, this is the new normal. And if you've gone to all the trouble to identify in your workflow and in your customer journey, and you have trained your associates to do virtual tours, and you've trained your prospects and your associates how to manage a self-guided tour, you're not going back. Now, guided tours, still the king, right? With over 550,000 individual guided tours, right?
But I mean, this is for the whole year. I mean, we didn't have self-guided tours or virtual tours until mid-July, and then it took some time to ramp up. So, I mean,
that is the point. Yeah, because when you think about from July, Kobe, when you think back from July that we've had over 122,000 recorded self-guided tours,
right?
You're 100% right. So, and what's so fun about this is that these numbers, when you look at if you go to the next slide, when you look at the conversion, virtual tours was really kicking self-guided tours kind of in the butt at the beginning. And now the gap's kind of closing more and more. Folks want options. That's what your prospects want. They want options. And now it's not just about having a solution. Is which solution that you have, and how well that you're working your solutions, and how well you have these tour types, how well you are advertising your tour types. Take a look at what we like to look at, the friction points that you have in some of these, in some of these processes that in your workflow that you have. Be brutally honest with yourself and go out, pretend like you're doing the self-guided tour yourself and see how easy it is. Is it easy to find? Do I understand all the steps? Am I being communicated to effectively? Be brutally honest. This number is going to continue to grow, and we're going to talk about more of that when we get down to our top 5 here in a little bit. So applications, let's keep moving on. We're going down the funnel. We have all of that top level heavy leads that we talked about. New applications for student at 45.28%. People are on the move. The applications are up for student. Like I just said, 45%. It's like 63%. For conventional, it's a big gap. These are all big numbers because you're moving from something with 0.53 to 0.77. That's a huge gap. But what's fun is what would be nice if we could, and maybe this is something we can work on in the future, you start laying over these new applicants with the leads, and then you see the ones that go through screening. Same pattern is happening in students. This is things slowed down for a little bit, and then all of a sudden, how quickly can we move? How quickly can we get them in? How quickly can we get them approved, screened, moved into the property? But when you look at the new applicants per unit for conventional, you can see right where we kind of halted everything in 2020. What's interesting here to me, and Dennis is probably losing his mind because we've had a conversation about that this morning. I left you a message, Dennis Smiley. But what's interesting about this for me is when you're looking at the year over year being at 63%, again, to Kobe's point, when I emailed him this morning and go, is that number right? It's the gap between the 0.11 and the 0.18%. That's a significant gap for the end of the year. And, I think with leasing season being pushed, summertime being pushed, that's part of this story here. And it's not that that we're that far off or we're doing that much better. It just happened later. Got it? Did I explain that to suit you? Good. Making sure you're the one this morning, and you were right, Kobe. You're 100% right. So looking at screenings, keeping going down the funnel, but we still see those volume of leads. Same thing with student, down a little bit. But what's interesting here is, again, back in March, April, and May, where they had that big gap where everything sort of dropped off. But now look at them, man, they're back on track, which looks fantastic. And then when you look at the conventional screenings per unit, it's up 9%, which is fantastic, right? In the year of a pandemic, little bit of a halt at leasing, and then we worked on the follow-up, got those contact points, went through that, got folks moving. We told everybody, hold their hand through the application process. We're seeing people drop off. So making sure that application, holding their hand, communicating through the screening, that was key.
Yeah, we missed out on that early leasing season in March and April, and it just got pushed.
It did.
To the summer when people were like, all right, well, I mean, we're in this, and so let's look for a new place.
Yeah, absolutely. And like we said, that, you know, the number of people that were filling out change of address cards, the number of people going, I'm waking up and I'm living in San Francisco and I'm paying a ton of money. Why am I doing that? Why can't I'm going to move to Nashville. I'm going to move to Austin. I'm going to move to, you know, somewhere else. You're exactly right. Everybody sort of had that epiphany moment to kind of move forward with life. So on that next slide, when we're looking at leases, the first thing we're going to look at in student is the leases generated per unit versus the leases approved per unit. Year over year, student leases generated per unit is up 5% and approved per unit up, right, 4.76% year over year. I'm telling you, up. This is great. This is great. Just when we thought it wasn't possible. Conventional, look at this, up 11.11% leases generated per unit. And I'm going to say no change in leases approved in the year of a pandemic is a big win.
That's
a huge win. It's a huge win. Because I can tell you back in March and April and May, people did not feel like this was going to be the story that we were going to be telling. So
right.
huge win. Excellent. But why was it a big win? Here's the reason why it was a big win, right? Is because of the concessions. And a lot of the things Dennis is saying that the impact of the Great Migration, the volume it created, that's what we saw, that top into the funnel of all those leads. People, the searches were saying they're looking in the town they're in, they're looking at the county over, and they're looking 3 states over. People cast a wide net. They were doing a lot of research. They were big into research mode. We've worked them down the funnel, but to get them to stay with us and to get them to move in, we had to offer them a little bit of a bait, right? Student, down 2.16% year over year, concession dollars per unit. Part of the reason why that's possible, I think, I did not confirm this with anybody, but I'm willing to bet, is that student does a lot of things that aren't like money based on the books rent a lot of times, and everybody records it differently and their end of their business. But like with students, while the parent would like to get a discount, the student wants something other than a discount, right? Because somebody else is paying the rent. Yeah, so it might be an Apple Watch or a TV or whatever they're giving away. So they're able to keep it a little bit tighter. Now, conventional, a little bit more, 36.7% up in concession. But, you know, cash is king for us. I mean, I can tell you all the times I ever did anything that you move in and you get a physical item. Yeah, whatever. If I said you move in and you get, you know, rent off, that's when they jumped. And I think the thing that we learned here, and we've been talking about concessions this whole time, is this matches, I'm pointing at my own screen, which you can't see, this matches that delay that we talked about, Kobe, and leasing season, that July, August, and September. See where we just started, May, let's throw some stuff out there and see what happens. Then the leasing season started to get delayed a little bit more. We started offering things July, August, September, reached a peak in October. Things got a little flat in November, and now they're back at the end of the year. They're like, okay, we got to capture what we can. The thing that we kept on saying to clients is, your first offer is your best offer. If you're going to offer concessions, sit down, figure out what you can do, what's the best first offer you can get, and you're not going back and changing it over and over again. You got one shot to get their attention, right? And the best way that you can do that, and this is something that folks have done very, very well, is not to offer that concession across the board if you don't have to. Offer it on limited floor plans, offer it on limiting floor plan types, offer it on specific units. If you move into one of these 6 units, you're going to get YZ. You're not going to have to worry about offering it to everybody. You don't have to do that as long as you have it documented with fair housing. Jake Johnson is asking if you can go back to the student slide real quickly one more time, and we'll have these available for you at the end. But you can see what we just reported, that it was down year over year, 2.16% concessions. So you're welcome, Jake, no problem. So let's keep looking at the next thing is call volume. This is a little bit of a selfish thing that we like to share. Call volumes have been up at the Entrada call center. It's been an absolutely crazy. I mean, just insane, right? So in a good way. But calls per unit up for students 16.98%. I find this interesting because, this is not typically a demographic that wants to get on the phone, right? But everybody has questions about what's going on, and we were getting all this volume in, so that's fine. That's good. When you look at conventional, it's very much the same pattern that we're seeing. You know why? I think a lot of times, a lot of things that people are coming in for, if it's resident calls, they're not differentiating about, what they're looking for. So we're right there about the same place. Actually, I want to say, I think this is exactly the same slide. My bad there. But 16.98% that we're seeing increase in the call center. A lot of this on the next slide, you'll be able to see where it's coming from. You know, at the beginning of COVID, we saw the lead calls drop and the resident calls spike. And now this has gotten a lot tighter. Did you look here at the student properties, lead and resident phone call percentages of the total calls? Resident calls at one point were far exceeding lead calls, but now they're down and lead calls are up. I think that's how everybody would like to end the year, right? And same thing for conventional. Resident calls year over year down 3%, lead calls are up 3%. So that's a really good number to report. I will say this for the telephone, while chat and email and chat bots and all of these different ways of communicating with prospects are super important. The phone, I'm telling you, when things get weird, people want to talk to somebody, right? I mean, they want to pick up the phone and talk to somebody. If things are urgent, they want to talk to somebody. There's some sort of trust factor in hearing somebody's voice and hearing them say, this is what the apartment, this is how much it costs. Yes, you can't have a big dog. That gives them a little bit more confidence. So
that's why we've spent hours on hold over the last little while, trying to talk to our internet providers and healthcare providers, right?
Yes. When you can, here's the deal: when you can't find an answer online, why would you keep digging around, man? Kobe spent 27 hours on the phone with somebody or something like that.
Pick up the phone.
27 hours. Yeah. It seems like it, right? So this has been a lot of information, right? This is a lot of information, but this is what we want to leave you here with is our top 5 trends for 2020 and beyond. First trend that we have, what a year, is virtual customer engagement. We did a session on this at the beginning of COVID with a couple of clients from Rangewater and from Peak Campus. But guys, this is huge. It's become a business. I can think of a business out of Atlanta, Craft Happy, 2 girls that work with Rangewater. This is a shameless plug. They're friends of mine, but I'm going to tell you, they had a business to do crafts with residents. It's a side hustle with residents at the property. Best thing ever happened to them was COVID, because now they just mail out all the stuff and you can do a craft, you know, with people on a virtual party with a glass of wine. Super popular. Will we ever go back to having pizza parties in the leasing office? I can tell you, I kind of hope we don't. You know, I think this is a much better way. It's kind of the new way. And possibly it'll be a hybrid model of both. But kudos to those site teams. We've said it this whole time. The site teams have made all of these possible for their residents, for the folks at the corporate office. They're the frontline workers. Those virtual customer engagement opportunities have been huge. Second one, this is a favorite of mine. Leasing offices moving to 100% virtual. Kobe and I talk about this a lot, and we're working on promoting this for some in a way that we can kind of explain it. But yes, maybe it's not right for all assets and all markets, all product types, but take a look. Now that you have figured out a way to do it virtually, self-guided tours, if your people are satisfied, if your reputation management is good, and you're offering it, if your rents are growing, if your associates are happy, there's an opportunity to stay this way, right? Again, not all assets, not all markets, but I'm telling you, this is a trend, and we're hearing it every day from people going, you know what? We don't want to go back. We want to keep moving forward, and we think this is what moving forward looks like. That's a good one. Third one, tour options. Your customers want options. That, like we said before, this is not going away. This is here to stay. Figure it out. Let us help you figure it out. It can be super high-end, high-tech smart home talking to you in the apartment, or it can be as simple as you're putting, you know, a QR code, or you're putting a phone number for them to call you in the leasing office while they're in the model, and you're talking them through on FaceTime. We can do it any way you want to, but we can track those tour types, and you're going to see such great growth. Your customers want it. Probably my other favorite thing is the technology adoption, is that things that this time last year people were talking about would be a nice to have are now a have to have. Like there was a bit of a bubble with, we don't really need 3D tours, we don't really need to have video on site anymore, and self-guided tour sounds nice, but you know, they just don't get the same impact as working with someone face to face. I'm going to tell you, COVID moved us forward 5 to 10 years in technology, not just for any industry, but specifically multifamily. We've always been a little bit behind when it comes, but now we are on par. We are competing with retail and other industries when it comes to technology and what we offer. And it is up to us as an industry and Entrata as a company to keep that moving forward. So for me, that is a huge win. And then the fifth one is something Kobe has to share.
Yeah, so this one isn't necessarily a trend because it encapsulates all those other trends that Virginia was talking about. But we recently did a study that we are just about to publish on the COVID-19 trends or COVID-19 page on entrata.com that you can take a look at here shortly. But we surveyed a few hundred property managers, probably some of your property managers, and we got some interesting results on the impact that they've seen through COVID. And a lot of them we've talked about in this webinar, and the trends that Virginia mentioned, number 1 through 4. But some of them were really interesting to us. Virtual tours, self-guided tours, were first and third as the most helpful tech tools available, and that's across the board.
No doubt.
Any tech tools that they had available to them, whether that be like an AI assistant or smart home locks, things like that. First and third were virtual tours and self-guided tours. So they're very, very important to your property managers. 2/3 of the people we polled saw significant or moderate increase in credit card payments during the pandemic. We saw the data that pointed that out. They anecdotally, they knew it was happening. We just saw the data to make sure that was happening. And third, this is another key takeaway that we liked, but more than half of property managers observed a significant or moderate increase the amount of month-to-month leases signed during the pandemic, which is great if we're getting those fees, like Virginia said.
Yep.
So
you're not getting the fees, yeah.
Exactly. So they anecdotally they are seeing the same thing that the trends are showing. The data is showing through the trends. So we wanted just to point that out and let you know that this survey summary will be available on the COVID-19 page very shortly, probably about the same time that this webinar recording and the slides are up there as well.
But you know what is interesting about all of this, and something that Dennis and I talked about yesterday, is that this has given us an opportunity as an industry to sort of shape customer behaviors versus to what we've always done is sort of reacted, right, to what the customers wanted to do. And this is what we wanted to do with this survey too, is like, what we do as a company, are we lining up with who's using our products? And that's what's so genius about this survey, is it's not the C-suite or somebody that's running the marketing department. We're asking the folks on site, what do you need? What has been most helpful? So
end users,
yeah, the end user is so stinking important. And the idea that they're like, listen, was those first couple of weeks of doing virtual tours cumbersome and I felt silly and I didn't know what to do, and the camera, they're looking at my nose? Yes, but they have figured it out, man, and they look good now.
Yep,
they're
down to a science now.
Yeah, now they're really professional. So this has been good. It's been it was a heck of a year, as we would say at Entrata, right? A heck of a year in 2020. But we're really looking forward to 2021. We hope those of you that can join us for Basecamp will. We certainly will keep coming up with some virtual ideas and some virtual events and
we've got some great entertainment at Basecamp, so you don't want to.
Can't wait. I can't wait for one of the speakers. I have his new book, so I cannot wait about that. So, But Kobe, thank you for being my right-hand person today.
Yeah, happy to be here, Virginia.
You make a great Chase Harrington.
I don't know about that, but I can fill in for an hour.
Exactly. But thanks to everybody for joining the presentation. Thank you for the Entrata team for gathering the data so quickly for us. And if you have any questions, you're welcome to reach out to me at vlove@entrata.com. Like Kobe mentioned, the presentation and the survey will be available on entrata.com/COVID-19 page. If you have suggestions for further webinars or things you want to learn, let us know. We will be more than happy to put it together. Thanks again, everybody.
Thanks. Have a great day.